we have to start with Sarah Palin. Well, now we have a lot of details coming out about her new book, Going Rogue. So what the AP did was they did fact-checking, and they found 11 things in the book that were not true. And, of course, Sarah Palin is outraged by this. She says that wasn't fact-checking, it was opposition research. Okay, now, of course, if they fact-check a Democrat, well, that's just the media doing their job. If they fact-check a Republican, it's opposition research and possibly sexist. We'll get to that a little later. Okay, so now I looked at the Associated Press story, and I'll tell you, I would say a third of these, and I don't want to go through all of them, but a third of these were, you know, I hear you, they're right, but I'm not sweating it. Here, let me give you a couple of examples. She says in the book that she always tried to, you know, stay at the lowest possible hotels and not burden the taxpayers of Alaska whenever she traveled. And the Associated Press says that is true most of the time, but that from time to time that was not the case. And she even said, quote, "I don't want any place that gives you slippers and robes." Well, when she was in a conference in New York in 2007, she took her daughter at the expense of the Alaska taxpayers, which she traveled with her family a lot of times. And she stayed at the Essex Hotel overlooking Central Park at $707 a night. And yes, robes and slippers were included. Okay, now, I don't sweat that. I mean, I get it. She's being hypocritical in that case and in some other cases. But she's the governor. She's going to New York. She's not going to stay at the Motel 6. She's not, you know, going to stay in the Bronx. Okay, so she went to the Essex thing. I mean, if that was her biggest problem, it'd be no big deal, right, in my opinion. And some governors are absurd about this, like Mark Sanford is the world's biggest hypocrite on this. He defeated the former governor of South Carolina by saying, oh my God, he's spending too much money on airplanes and hotels, etc. And for the first couple of years, Sanford didn't spend that much money on hotels and planes, and then when he thought no one was paying attention, wound up flying first class, spending thousands upon thousands of dollars on higher class tickets on planes, at the top hotels, before he was telling his staffers to not waste Post-it notes, right? And then we found out that he was staying at the top hotels and taking first class tickets. So I don't think what Palin did rises to that level. So I'm going to give her a pass on that one. You can make up your own mind on it, but I didn't see that as a big deal. Now, she also said that she ran her campaign on small donations. And Associated Press looked at it, and in fact, more than half of her donations came from people, PACs and people that gave over $500. And the maximum is $1,000 or $2,000, depending on the category. So they consider that a large contributor. And then she took $76,000 from the Republican Party committees. So in fact, she raised a lot of money from big contributors, and she did not give some of the money back, as she claimed, if she thought there was a conflict of interest. Now, again, that's a real issue, but a lot of people raise money from small donors and from large donors. She fudges the facts a little bit on that. I'm not overly sweating, okay? It's something that a lot of politicians do. Now, let's get to the things that the Associated Press were unquestionably right about and what Palin really wants to avoid, and that's why she wants to call it opposition research and try to smear the Associated Press with it, right? So, for example, she says, oh, she's totally against the stimulus bill, and she can't believe that Obama passes, the bailout, okay? And that the bailout is outrageous, and she's always been against it, and it's all Obama's fault. Well, here's the problem. Obama didn't pass the bailout. George W. Bush did. Problem number two, John McCain voted for it. Problem number three, Sarah Palin at the time thought it was a great idea. So let me give you some quotes. She said, she praised McCain for being, quote, this is her words, instrumental in bringing folks together to pass a $700 billion bailout. And after that, she said, quote, it is a time of crisis, and government did have to step in. Government had to step in, okay? And then, of course, the usual Palin non sequitur. She said, ultimately, what the bailout does is help those who are concerned about health care reform that is needed to help shore up our economy. Healthcare reform, bailout, I'm not quite sure what the connection is, but she's supporting the bailout and healthcare reform there when she was on the campaign trail. Now she writes in her book as if she was never in favor of it and that it's all Obama's fault. Well, I mean, that's just, what you've stated is just not true, And if the Associated Press does not report that from a major political figure, well, then they're not doing their job. All right, then we go to point number 2. As again, in another example, and you could go read the Associated Press article that has all 11 untruths, including, whether she got campaign money from lobbyists who were campaigning for oil rights. And she said she criticized the earlier governor, saying, "Oh, I can't believe he had an aide that was a lobbyist to some oil companies." And then, of course, one of her top aides was a lobbyist to the oil company that wound up winning the bid there, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a whole treasure trove of information. But let me give you one more here, specific. She said, Ronald Reagan faced an even worse recession than Obama is facing right now, and that he showed us, quote, how to get out of one. If you want real job growth, you cut capital gains taxes and slay the death tax once and for all. Now, if you're going to state that this is, remember what Rush Limbaugh called this. He called it the most substantive political policy book that he had ever read, which is an amazing statement, right? Now, if you're going to make policy statements, you got to at least check your facts, right, to make sure you got it right so you don't embarrass yourself. Well, first of all, no one believes that the recession under Reagan was larger than the one under Obama. It was bad, but it was over in 16 months. This one is going on 23 months. And there is about 10 reasons why this recession is deeper and worse than the one that they say Reagan inherited and then Obama inherited this one. But that's a minor point. You can quibble about which one is larger, et cetera. But here are the things that are not disputable. She said, oh, you see, he showed us how to get out of that recession by, being against the death tax, which is another way of calling the estate tax, the Republican way of calling it. Reagan never repealed the estate tax. That just didn't happen. So how would that help in getting us out of that recession? It wouldn't, because it didn't occur, right? And she says, well, he lowered the capital gains tax, and obviously that got us out of the recession. Well, turns out the capital gains tax now is lower than it was under Reagan. I mean, just do some fundamental research. Just like, hey, you know what? A capital gains tax being low, that's what Reagan showed, hence low under Obama and we'll win. Oh, damn it! It's lower now than it was under Reagan, and that still didn't help. Fact check yourself a little bit. I believe someone once said, check yourself before you wreck yourself. And then don't come around blaming the Associated Press for pointing out things that are true. Okay? And look, if you're a supporter of Palin or you're an opponent of Palin or you have an open mind, go read the Associated Press story, and like I did, look to see what makes sense and what doesn't, what's important, what's not important, and make up your own mind. But it's not opposition research to do fact-checking of politicians. That's what journalists are supposed to do.
If you like this little clip, you'll love the whole show. It loops 24/7 on theyoungturks.com. Go and check it out right now.